presence of the day. It's with great pleasure that I introduce to you Madam Rosalie Varda, who is a French artistic director. She is a costume designer for film, theater, and opera. She is also the daughter of the acclaimed filmmaker of French New Wave, Agnes Varda and Jacques Demy. Currently, she is heading and managing the Cine Tamaris company, and she held a master class here this morning, which I hope some of you got to attend. And I would like to introduce Mr. Richie Mehta. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Richie Mehta, who is a Canadian film director. Many of us saw his film yesterday, which is India in a Day, which was screened last evening. He also held a master class during the session, I think 2 days back. Yesterday morning, yes. And his first feature film, Amal, was released in 2008, and it was nominated for the Best Motion Picture and Best Director in the 29 Genie Awards. And what is unique about the film that was screened last evening was that directors Anurag Kashyap and Ridley Scott, along with Google, asked Indians to shoot a day in the life of India. They inhabit and send it across. So 160,000 Indians submitted videos, some as long as 15 hours. It left filmmaker Mr. Richie Mehta, along with his team of 14, to view 400 hours of footage, which they did over a period of 3 months. Finally, work of 330 filmmakers made it to the 80-plus minute final feature, which came together after 4 months of editing. I think it was remarkable watching that film. It was really unique. I welcome you.
Thank you.
And I would request both our guests to make an opening statement, then I open the house for questions. Can I ask, Madam, for you to make an opening statement, tell about yourself, your work, your trip to India, and then we can take it forward. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, hello. So yes, I'm a costume designer and I do art direction now. And I was very happy to come here to be able to share and to do a masterclass about costume in cinema. And this morning it was, I tried to focus and to be able to explain really what is my job and how I work with film directors, art department, director of photography, and the relationship between a costume designer and a film, and the relation between a costume and an actor or an actress, and how it goes together, and why it should go together, and why a costume designer should be always very, back and be for the story and for the character. So this was the idea of sharing this masterclass this morning, and I came with a lot of little videos and photos, so it was kind of joyful.
Yes, my name is Richie Mehta, and as Madam said, I'm born in Toronto via Punjab, and the last 15 years I've been spending about 6 months a year in India. This is India in a Day is my 4th feature film. The first 2 films, Amal and Siddharth, were Hindi language films shot in Delhi, released all over the world, and now releasing in India, finally, after years. And then I made a science fiction film in Canada as well, which was in English with non-Indian actors. But this is my 4th film now, and I'm currently living in London, where this film was constructed. All the post-production on this film was done there. And this is my 2nd time at this festival, and I'm very, very happy and very proud to be here. And I'm very excited because, in fact, this festival is a launch of the film. We screened it theatrically in the hall yesterday, but it's releasing on YouTube today because it is Google's first feature film. So it releases on YouTube today in India to be seen forever for free. So anyone can go and watch it after this if you haven't seen it.
That's interesting. Now we'll open up for questions and answers. 2 requests as usual. Please identify yourself, your name and your organizations, and please switch off your telephone, mobile phones, or put it on silent. Thank you. Yeah, first.
question to you is, how important is costume for a film industry?
I'm sorry?
How important a costume is for a film industry?
For the film, you mean for the film industry? I mean, you mean like big business?
Like for a film, for business.
How important is costume for a film?
Oh,
Maybe the costume world is for the film industry.
oh, okay. So there's two answers, I think. I think a costume is important for a long feature film or a short film, and I think is important for the lead part, and it's important for the whatever you see on the screen. So of course it's important because it's the first thing that you see of an actor or an actress. Is the first thing you see on the screen is how it looks like, how he looks like, or what does she wear. So it gives you information right away about the character. The second part of your question is, how is the business of costume? So the business of costume is very difficult because, for period movies, I saw this morning I showed a lot of extent of period production I have done. It's very difficult because you need to run some base of the costume in costume department, okay? And those costume department, it's very tough business for them because they need to have a lot of costume, and there's not a lot of period costume. I mean in Europe, I'm talking about Europe and United States. And for costume designer like me, we are used to, to be able to do the costume. Our first job is not to go in a shop and buy. Our job is to reinvent with a film director for the story the costume. So that means sometimes on some production I have done, like the costume department is 50%, between the people for the wardrobe, people sewing, people washing, people getting the costume old, because when you buy a costume, it's new, but sometimes in the film, the character needs to have an old shirt. So you have to get it old, wear it, and everything. So this is, the unit of costume department, if it's that your question, requires to be a whole crew, and I never can work alone, so it's different person. And then, of course, it's always very related to makeup and hairdress. With the hair and the makeup is all related to costume. So finally, it's a business, and it's very important. And in the industry of India and in the industry of your film, like I would say classic Bollywood film, costumes are important. It's a big business. Okay.
My question is with you. My question is with you. The films are designed by the costumes only. Then the fashion comes from the film to the costumes. People see the costumes in the films and that come to the fashion. So how both are connected with the films and costumes? The designers, fashion designers, and the costume designers. What do you feel about it?
Okay, so I think it's both ways. Sometimes, fashion has always a relationship with films, because if you do a film in 2016 and you are in a normal life, you will wear the costume of now. And when we will see the film in 20 years, maybe the fashion will have changed, and we will look and say, oh, you remember that dress? We don't wear this anymore. So fashion, of course, is related to cinema. But sometimes what is interesting too is that in very special films, there was costume in the film and it influenced the fashion. So it's the other side, it's the other side. So this is it's really a relationship. What I think, is very interesting when you work with film directors is sometimes you try to do costumes that are not too much influenced by the street fashion. Why? Because when you will see the film later on, it will be less, I don't know how to say in English, it will be less not in fashion. To be out of fashion is, I think, very interesting, because then the story can be watched 10 years, 20, 30 years after.
Well, and inhabit its own world.
Yeah.
It's a creation of the world.
Yes. So, in France, as costume sometimes had influence on fashion. Like, for an example, my father did a film in 1964 called The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and the actress was Catherine Deneuve. And at that period, women had a lot of hair with a lot of volume, okay? And my father said to her, I don't want this. I want you to have, a little head and the hair on the back, like a young girl. And she said, no, I want my big hair because it's in fashion. And finally, she, of course, accepted what the film director wanted. She was not very happy. But what happened is that all the young girls in France took this hair style for at least 1 year after the film. So I think sometimes, it's the both ways.
That was his question. I mean, is it films which
What?
That was his question.
Do you feel that fashion designer can change the society?
I don't
People are
understand.
advanced, and today the people of the whole world, they are changing their dresses. Mughal Azam people seen, Pakiza they have seen, Raj Kapoor they have seen, Rajan Kumar they have seen. Now, they are changing the society. So it's the effect society also, fashion designer. In what way you think about it?
I didn't understand everything.
No, what he says is how can fashion and costume designing in films impact or influence society as far as dressing is concerned? Because the same thing that you said.
Yeah, you've said it.
You said it, that film sometimes sets the
Yeah,
trend.
it sets the trend. It can very much set the trend.
Yes, you have big example like in American movies like Blockbuster that, you have an actress and she has a red dress and everybody wants to have a red dress and I don't know. But I think what is more important than this, to be honest, for me, fashion is not very interesting. So I think what is really interesting in films is, does the story of a film, does the feeling of the film, does the emotion of the film change society? And this, I think, yes. Does it change the way we see things? Yes. This is, I think, much more important than costume. To be honest with you, I'm not very interested in fashion, weirdly.
There was a great, if I may interject, there's a great anecdote for the TV series Star Trek, where one of the lead characters was bald, the captain. And in a press conference, somebody asked him, sir, do you believe in the 23rd century they would have come up with a cure for baldness? And he said, I believe in the 23rd century they won't care. Which I think is far more appropriate. Picard. Yeah, Patrick Stewart, the bald.
Of course, I love Star Trek.
And it's a very, very interesting comment, of course. Where are we going? Why should they care in the future? That's more to the point, I think, also what you're saying, that it's a reflection of what's happening. One of the things I find very relevant about costumes is it allows the actor to inhabit the character.
Well, because it's the first thing you see. Yes, it becomes, I always say a costume with no actor is a dead costume.
Yes, totally.
It has nothing interesting. The costume begins to be interesting when it's on a real body.
Yeah.
And then it's beginning.
Yeah. And it helps if it's a good script.
First, there's literature. First, it's words. Then it's imagination of a film director. And then all the crew is around him to go in his project, is in his head. This is, I think, the most interesting part of our job, is to collaborate with a film director.
I agree.
Yeah. My question is to Mr. Richie Mehta. You said that you moved between India and England, and so what inspires you more? From where your inspiration comes? And
My inspiration comes very specifically from my life experiences. After I did my first film, when I was finishing my first film, Amal, I came back to do some dubbing, the actors, and I said, okay, I've done this film in India, I'm very proud of it, now I'll go back and maybe do something else in Canada. And then I had some life experience last few days when I was leaving India, and it was so profound, I said, oh my God, I have to do something on this now, as a film. And then as I was finishing the next film, I had another life experience. And then I said, I have to come back to India now and address this, and it keeps happening. I find that if you're in an open mode, where you're letting everything in, you're hearing it and you're seeing it, and even if you walk down the street here, your life will change in this environment. If you really pay attention to everything you're seeing, it's overwhelming for us. And, and it is a cliche, but it's real. So I find, I mean, growing up in Canada, it's an environment where you can predict your life and your lifestyle and your day down to the minute. And if you're off by a few minutes, you have to explain why. That's not an issue here. If you're half an hour late, it's completely understood and accepted. Life happened. And I think that's more natural. I think that's a more natural way of being. What I grew up in is not natural, and it is a way of being. And so I find I just keep getting inspired by real natural life, which happens to be here.
And do you think the whole genre of documentary filmmaking has undergone a metamorphosis with makers like Asif Kapadia there and like you? So
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would say Asif has been a big influence. He's a friend and a very big inspiration. I think Senna is a masterpiece, and I think it's, to me, changed the face of documentaries. After doing a film like this, India in a Day, which, again, we didn't shoot anything for the film. It was entirely crowdsourced. So the entire film is comprised of what Indians gave us, or who happens to be in India at the time gave us. So it's a different type of film altogether. And for me, I think where a really interesting space film is heading towards is some sort of amalgamation of the two, of fiction and doc. When I did my second film, Siddharth, which was very much on the streets in Delhi, and it was about a chainwala, a guy who fixes broken zippers. He just works for rupees a day. And the entire film was shot in real environments where the actors were put in those environments, and we had rehearsed, and they knew what to do, and they played out their scene, and we were with them. But it was just the cameraman, and the guy, the sound recordist was hidden in the crowd with his backpack, and so nobody really knew what was happening. And there's real integration of real life with that scene, and that's one stylistic take of the amalgamation. I think it's going to go even further, because in documentaries, it's my first doc, when an audience sits down to watch a documentary, they don't know the form the film is going to take. How could we have known that a film like Senna would have no interviews in it? It would be entirely footage-based, like what this crowdsourced now. So in that way, it's almost like a short animation piece. You don't know what the form the film is going to take, and therefore, the scope for creative structuring is limitless. Fiction feature films have a very strict limitation, which it must adhere to. Having script and costume and actor and performance and all this stuff. And there's amazing creativity within that. But now you have a medium which has completely blown open in the last few years. And I find the documentaries where you don't have traditional interviews, where people can experiment with form, where you question, is it real or not? I'm not even sure what I'm seeing. Then you get to the heart of the sentiment, which is real. I think that's very exciting.
one last question from me for Richie, and that's how much of a Punjabi you are.
I mean, I grew up in a Punjabi household. My favorite food is chole bhature. I've just started cooking, and I cook all Punjabi dishes. And, when I dream of home, I dream of Punjab. So how's that?
Hi. I got a chance to attend your masterclass yesterday morning. My question would be that how did you deal with the pressure of portraying an entire country, especially one as diverse as India, in one single documentary? And extending this question, how does a director make sure that maintain an objectivity as well as stay real to his subject in a documentary?
Wow. How much time do we have?
There's no objectivity to be an artist.
Yeah. No objectivity, you said.
Yeah, no.
It's true. There is actually no objectivity, even if you can try to fight against it.
Sorry.
No, it's absolutely true. You can't help it. You're a subject. There's no objectivity at all. In fact, it doesn't even exist. It's this ideal. Maybe it's not even an ideal. It's a construct. It doesn't exist. Like the perfect table doesn't exist. We can discuss it in form. There was a pressure, I think, with dealing with this film that would purport to represent all of India in a certain way. But also when we realized that, and I mentioned in the class, that nobody submitted footage from a certain economic strata of society. What we would all agree upon are the economically wealthy in this country did not submit any footage. So we realized, well, this is not going to be a full cross-section of what's happening in India. It's going to be a cross-section based on the people who chose to participate. In the same way elected government is the chosen representative of the people who chose to vote, to an extent. So that was already a subjectivity entering into play. And then I followed my instinct and our team followed our instinct, and I got very lucky. And this is very rare in filmmaking forever, where you have an entire creative team, me and the editor and the producers, even the backers with Google. Everyone who dealt with this film, we have the same value system in life, where we would talk about things, the way we see the world. And we had a basic fundamental agreement on what was important to us and how we saw ourselves in this world, nothing to do with film. So when people's values align, and then you start to instinctively respond to what people are showing you in their footage, which has no head or tail, in a way, we started to agree upon what was touching, what was interesting, what was relevant. And so the main stories that emerged in the film, I think anyone probably would have recognized that these are the main stories. How those take shape and form then becomes the artistry of the construction. But it just became a question of follow the instinct purely. Don't compromise in the sense of you're making this a marketable entity. Just follow what works for this. And then therefore you would be most true to what the footage is trying to tell you. Because understand, sometimes we had a massive database where these clips were put in, and they were organized by user, and each clip was rated by people watching these clips. So if a clip is rated 1 out of 5, because it is somebody moving the camera and shooting the carpet for a minute before they turn it off, and that was submitted as a clip because they gave raw footage. So somebody saw that clip and gave it a 0 out of 5 because it's a moving camera on the carpet. And then we dismissed some of the footage. And then I was looking at the same user, and I come upon something else, and I say, this is a very special piece of footage. And I look at another piece from that user, and it was rated 0 out of 5. I say, wait a sec. I click on the user, and I see 7,000 clips submitted by that same person. I say, oh my God, this person submitted 7,000 clips to us. That means they were shooting all day. They had something to say, and we just encountered one of their clips out of context, which had no meaning. So now I got to spend 2 weeks, watch everything they gave, and figure out what they were trying to do. Because they gave us a story, and it was out of order and scattered. And that was a very special experience. That was like a private detective experience. And then it becomes this journey of, oh my God, this person's trying to say something. Can we fit it into this and this? And so that was a long answer. The short answer is labor. That's how I dealt with it. It should be available right now. Although right before the press conference, I heard there was a technical issue with the upload. So if it's not now, it should be in an hour or two. Yeah.
But will it also change the way films are made and the way they will be viewed?
I think so. This will in fact affect industry. How films are viewed are affecting industry, right? Because there was a time where there was a set distribution pattern, and then you work backwards for the investment and all the artists involved. You have a budget for a department. Everything is dwindling in terms of the arts, especially in independent space, because films are now being given away in a certain manner. I think we have to figure out a way to account for that. I'm very excited to be involved in a film where it's being given away for free, because it was shot for free by Indians all over the country, and it should be given away for free. Maybe that has to do with the sense of entitlement that people face now. There was a time when you walk down the street and you go to a cinema and you pay money and you expect to be entertained. Now I think people walk down the street and expect to be entertained. You pick up your phone and it better be something good in there for me. And that includes feature films and music and all cat videos on YouTube, whatever, you name it.
But does that bode well for cinema?
I think, it's an interesting question to speak about France, because I cannot speak about, Canada, United States, even like,
It was an invention of cinema, so you have
yes,
every right to speak about it.
But France, there's the big questions now are in the industry of cinema is what's going to happen with theaters? What is going to happen with TV? Because of the internet, because of the telephone where you can see anything now and the music and everything that goes by something totally abstract is the network of internet. There's another way of viewing films, and I have 3 big sons, One is 33 and he's a director of photography. And we're always discussing how do you look at a film, and you know, everything is changing. Like, I think in France now there's a huge revolution on TV. People globally, you know, don't look at TV at the time where the program is programmed. They only look, they pick and they do their own TV. They choose the program they want to see. And, you know, for cinema, we still have an industry in France, people going to theaters. But for difficult films, for independent film, for documentary, typically, you know, I think there's something to rethink about the distribution. And I don't think, to be honest, that to be in a theater for certain documentary is a smart answer, because it will not work.
Yeah, no.
It will have a cost,
sure.
and the distributor will lose money, the production will lose money.
Yeah.
But we did not invent yet the economy of internet. Because the only problem, you know, with your project was, you know, really great. I'm producing right now a documentary in France, and the question was, I would have loved that documentary to be free on the net. But, you know, how do I do?
No,
Had to, you know, to produce it.
You get Google behind you.
I don't. You know, I didn't have Google behind me, but if I had, maybe I would have done it. I find it very interesting how the changement of communication and the fact that everybody can be a photographer, can be a filmmaker, that doesn't make you a photographer, that doesn't make you a filmmaker, because subjectivity is the base of what you're doing. You know, you gather the information of a lot of people, and then it's your eyes on it that will.
Yeah, you can't separate
yourself.
yourself.
You know, but I think we have really think over the distribution for very particular art, and it's for books, it's for music, it's for cinema, even it's for theater, because you know, how do you go in a theater see a play of 3 hours when you see that most of the people are addicted to their telephone every 5 minutes? How can they go in a theater, put the telephone, cut, and respect those 3 hours where you are there to share with the actors words, feelings? You know, so I think there's a really big reflection of education to help, by the education, the youngs and the less youngs, to respect the time of a film. Engaging, exactly. Yes, you know, the time to respect, it's maybe 10 minutes, or it may be 30 minutes, or it may be 1 hour. But I think this is the big changement now, is that we are all drugged by the telephones and by looking at everything. So we don't have that, you know, lapse of time you were talking about, tolerance to be able to look at something.
But you know what, I look at that also, I am an eternal optimist, and so I look at that and say, okay, well now the challenge, if I'm doing a 2-hour feature film or 90-minute film, my challenge is to entice a viewer in the first few minutes to want to do that. I have to fight for that now. The same way I have to fight for your attention or anyone's attention to speak to them. So I have to earn that, I have to build that into the structure of the film. And to me, it does come down to one fundamental thing, which has not changed ever, is the value of a script in a film. And it's the same thing as the value of a concept in a documentary, and then eventually a script in a documentary. And one thing I've recently come to feel in this country, in India, is one of the things it has excelled in the arts and cultural sector, for as long as I can think and examine, is literature. The level of literature that has come out of this country in the past, in the classical era and in the modern era, is unmatched in the world. It's on par with the rest of the world, easily. French literature is masterful.
But we're a very small country.
Yes, India is But why is it that Indian literature is studied all over the world and Indian cinema is not? What is the disconnect there? There is a disconnect, and Indian cinema is studied still and this is not criticism. This is an idea. It is Indian cinema, whereas a lot of Indian literature is seen as literature. And when I read still a book, a new book I find out of this country, it boggles my mind how well written it is, how well conceived it is, and that does not translate to film scripts. It is not translating to film scripts.
So Are you saying that the Indian film industry is not given the attention it deserves?
Just 1 second.
No, I said
Absolutely.
from that statement we understand that you are saying Indian films are not studied in other parts of the world, or is it the
No,
script
they are.
that is not?
They are studied.
The
for
literature of Indian literature is not reflected in the Indian film
the quality
scripts.
of Indian literature is not reflected in the quality of Indian scripts by and large, I think. And No. I'm saying that, this is a very interesting debate. I'm saying that in order to survive as a viable industry, especially with the changing face of distribution, the script is what will always be impervious. And Indian writers know that. When an Indian author writes a book with his or her own reflections, they only have the letters of the alphabet to work with. And they know how to wield those letters. Language of cinema is much more complicated because you're wielding letters and images, every color of the spectrum, every sound we hear. So it's a different type of wielding. But the script is the way through this. My argument is the script is the way through what you're saying. The distribution is going to collapse. The system is going to collapse. It's already collapsing. You're seeing it in the studios here. They're all starting to not fund these big films. Things are changing. But a good script will pass through that. It will get made.
In France, we say a good script can do a good film or a bad film, but a bad script can only do a bad film.
For sure. For sure.
That's
sure.
That's the base.
I'm saying if people all over the world pay attention to the quality of literature that has been created and give that same type of attention to the content, the idea, and the page, the films will be seen. They will travel. People will find them. People will sniff out the quality. It will withstand the changes in distribution.
But the kind of experimental cinema that is happening, even there, you think the script is very important?
It comes to concept then.
Yeah.
What's the concept? And that's a different type of writing. That's a writing in shooting. That's a writing in creation. What is that? It's a different type of language.
Can I say something more? I think, there's a very interesting going on the world. Cinema is a young industry, it's a young art. So it has been created, late 1900, and globally, the Frères Lumière, French engineer, began to shoot documentaries at the beginning. Well, I'm not going to do a history about that, but I'm very concerned on preservation. And I worked a lot in France on the preservation of films, of old films. And since I'm, dealing a company where we have old films, I did the digitalization and restoration of all the films of my parents. It took me 3 years to do it as a technical project, as a financial project, and cultural project. In India, for me it's very frightening because you have a total history of cinema. I mean, a huge history of cinema. But the preservation in India of film is really just beginning. So that means, for the young generation, they don't even know what is 35 millimeters argentic, film. And, it's beginning now to try to finance and to restore and digitalize films. And I think it's very important because it's your culture, it's your history, and you need it. That means, most of the films would just disappear because there are no negative we can take. And, so for my example, I restored all the film of my parents in 2K, 4K, and I redid a new negative that I deposit at the archive. What it means that in 200 years, 400 years, digital things, we don't know what's going to happen with it. We don't know the future of digital. It will maybe disappear. The only thing we know that is an archive for film is argentic film 35. Question, in the Indian production, how many films go back to a negative to go to deposit in a national archive?
Yeah. It's difficult, and it's like I cannot.
We don't have a system like that. We have in France, we don't have a system, I think, like that. Like for example, dépôt légal. The concept of dépôt légal is not there in India.
But dépôt légal is a concept to deposit legally your contract.
Yes.
But the National Archive is something else. The National Archive is to deposit 35 negative, argentic negative pellicule, film, and the sound. So that means with the new process of new technology
You
in
can still read the film.
200 years, or 300 years.
It's sad, but many of the films of masters like Satyajit Ray, Mrinal Singh, Gattar,
Okay, can I speak about him? We did a retrospective in the French, I'm sorry, because this is really a concern for me, so important about history of cinema. There is a retrospective at the French Cinematheque on Sagittaire, and I saw a beautiful film of 1963, Dans la ville. I don't know the...
Mahanagar. Yeah.
I mean, this film just got me in so emotion. The restoration is just beautiful. And the film is so modern, And I was thinking, we had a beginning of a retrospective in France, and the screening rooms are full. You imagine? Full to come and see. And this is wonderful. I think we should all work together that new generation are able to see a movie in black and white, and with another rhythm, another way of telling stories. That doesn't mean we have to do cinema like that. It means it's your history, it's our history, and we need to preserve this. We need to help the young generation to see old films. I'm sorry to say it's a little bit the teacher, I feel like I'm an old teacher, but the foundation of Sagittaire is working on the preservation and restoration of his films. But the history of Indian films, it's huge. And I know, because I was talking a lot with a lot of people, that there's some films that are going to be just disappeared.
Yep.
Because there's no more print.
Yep.
Nobody knows why it's the negative, and it's sad.
Yep.
Do we have any more questions? Or up, ma'am?
Sir, you are a technical person, you are a good making director person, you are belongs to Punjab and Canada, and you are thinking something to make something good in cinema. Punjabi people rule so many films, 60 to 80, Ramanand Sagar, Bihar Chopra, they are all came from Punjab and came to Bombay, and they established such cinema in the world. Now the condition today changed. Everybody coming to cinema. So what do you think about Canada, Punjab, and film industry, Bollywood and Hollywood?
How much time do we have?
2 days. 2 days.
Yeah, I'll give you the short answer. Yes, I'm born in Canada, and it's a Punjabi culture. I was born and raised in Mississauga, Brampton, which is a suburb of Toronto, where there's lots of Punjabis. And I'm very happy and very proud of that. And yes, you're right. There was a huge boom in the film industry with Punjabi filmmakers coming from Punjab and making wonderful, wonderful films. Maybe it's the same thing as the Parsis, decades ago in Bombay. Maybe every culture has their moment. I don't know. I think now it doesn't even matter. I will say, to bring it back to India in a day, what's really fascinating about this exercise, because we didn't know what we would get. People submitted footage from all over. We didn't know what that was. I think, because some of the footage we received was technically flawless, and I'm talking about motion picture quality. It could be in any film, what we were given, and they're in villages and interiors. And I think what happened is camera assistants, first, second camera assistants in the major industries in India, took their camera gear and went back to their villages and said, I'm just going to show my village. Because these people knew how to make films, and they were all over the country. And to me, it pointed to the diversity of the industry now. If you work on a film set in this industry, it's a mix of everybody. Everyone's from everywhere. Mera gaon mein aise hota hai. And they're from, northeast, you name it, islands. And it's wonderful that those voices are starting to penetrate into the mainstream here. And a festival like this is very important for that. And by the way, I have to add, as things change, as distribution becomes uncertain, as people are expected to get entertained all the time, it is easier for people to shoot films, or what they call films at least. And once in a while, GEM gets through that system. The role of the festival programmer and the festival is increasingly important, now. It's the most important it has ever been. 30 years ago, if a film got into Cannes, I mean, it was beautiful and wonderful, but it'll still find its way. They're probably very high quality films that would find their way to the public. Now, films will disappear if a festival programmer does not find them. If a festival like this does not show them, they will not be seen. And the amount of films in my head that I saw once at a festival that changed me. And I say, what was that? Because I can't find it anywhere. I'm a better person for at least having seen it. And those things will exist more, and they will slip through the cracks more. So I mean, that's where I tip my hat to festivals.
Thank you very much, both of you. It was a very insightful discussion. It went beyond what we were supposed to discuss, but it brought out so many things.
That's why costumes are good.
No.
Now,
No, even if you look at the Indian film industry and its costumes and the costumes that we still wear, we have our own indigenous. But we went into preservation. Thank you very much. I mean, we can carry on for us, but time is of essence.
Of course.
So
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you all of you. Thank you very much.